Welcome to the Connection Central Industry Podcast, where real conversations meet real strategies. Each episode we dive into the industries that keep Australia moving, talking with the leaders, innovators, and everyday operators, shaping what's next. So settle in, turn it up, and let's get into it.
Hi everybody, it's Michelle O'Hara here from Connection Central. I've got a very interesting guest today, Audrey Barucchi from People for Nature. Welcome, Audrey. Lovely to have you. So, Audrey, this is a really unique podcast today because quite often we have the business owners and they're talking about different business items and takeaways and things, but with People for Nature, it's a bit different. So what I'd love for you to do is to start by telling the audience a little bit about yourself, how you even got into starting the company, and what message you really sort of want to share with the broader audience today.
Yes. So my name is Audrey, and my last name is interesting. It's Barucchi, and we were trying to sort out how to pronounce my last name. My last name is actually from, which is a little island in the southeast of France. I grew up in France with a dad in the army, and so I traveled the world quite at a young age, and that gave me a lot of curiosity for other cultures, other places, other people. And in 2008, after traveling the world myself for a few years and living in many different interesting and beautiful places of the world, I ended up landing in Australia. I landed in Brisbane to start with. And I still remember calling my family at that stage and saying, there's something here that calls me. There's something very strong. And that thing was very much nature. It was not that it is a native tree, but it was the jacaranda season, where all the streets are covered with this beautiful, gorgeous purple. And I remember the first night I had a snack or something outside and I saw a possum for the very first time. And I was just in awe. I thought, oh, wow, this is so beautiful. The colors, the sky, the animals, just the presence of nature. So I decided to stay. I haven't left Australia since then. So this year will be 18 years on this beautiful land. How I came to start an environmental organization, an environmental charity, is very, very young, and I have no idea where that comes from. I fell in love with insects. I was passionate. I love looking at them. I love observing them. I love learning about them. I was the weird bug girl, that little girl that just looks at ants and thinks it's the most fascinating thing she's ever seen. And that, I think, has stayed with me. So I studied business. I actually studied business administration, have a master's in global trade and an MBA. I have spent a great chunk of my career in the corporate world. But that passion for insects has never, ever left me. And so probably about 15 years ago, when I was offered the chance to join a company, at the time it was a startup, with a vision to decarbonize, to depollute the heavy industry, I thought, this is it. This is what I want to do. Not for decarbonization itself, not for technology itself, just because I was really worried about what was happening to the insects. And climate change have been, huge impact on insect population over the last 30 years, just in my lifetime. And I thought, this is what I want to do. So I joined this startup. I spent a decade in an Australian startup. It is now an ASX listed company. And I sort of, this was sort of my entrance into, serious climate change work that I do. 10 years later, Michelle, realized one thing: the people that were working on the solutions, they don't quite understand the problem. That was a bit of a penny drop moment for me. I thought, hold on a minute. And the reason they don't understand the problem is because it's a very complex and systemic issue that we're facing. And most engineers, and I married one, so most engineers have a very linear way of thinking. That's what they've been taught in university, and they're very, very good at diving very deep into a problem and solving that part of the problem, but they're not very good at looking at the system as a whole and talking to all stakeholders engaged. So I had that realization. I thought, okay, time for me to get out of the corporate world and dedicate myself to education with a charitable purpose in mind. But interestingly, with all this experience in the corporate world, I thought, how can I use that for a charitable purpose? And this is why People for Nature was founded not only as a charity, we are a registered environmental charity, but also as a social enterprise. because we're using the tools and the mechanisms of business to actually do good.
Very nice. Share with us a few of those tools that you're using in order to educate people. Like, just share so that people can get more of an understanding.
Yeah. So for a few years, I had, explored so many different tools that exist for climate education. And a few years ago, I came across an amazing tool that had started in France, which is why, came across it. It's called Climate Fresque. Climate Fresque was actually created by a professor of engineering in France. And the story resonated with me because he had the same issue as had seen in the engineering companies I was working with. Just there is no systemic understanding of climate change for engineering. How do we, stop that? So he created a board game. The board game is a set of cards that people play to understand the causes and the consequences of climate change. And then what I really love about this tool is it's not just head stuff. It's also heart stuff. So after you kind of understand what is causing climate change, and also the ramifications on absolutely everything we know as of today. So ramifications on human health, on war, on, water sources, education and everything. Then you kind of come together as a group and you share how you feel. For me, that's the game changer because people will never act on what they understand. We know that they act because they care. So placing emotions back into the climate dialogue is critical. So we share. And then once we kind of go, okay, we all care, the next step is, okay, now we want to take action. So what do we do? And our tools also offer a chance to empower people to take action in their different spheres of influence. So of course, by spheres of influence, I mean in your home, in your school, in your workplace, in your community group. There are so many different spheres where you as an individual, as a citizen, you have power. And so we're kind of, looking at how we can actually influence society as a whole, this sort of citizen lens approach, citizen powered approach. Now, I've talked about Climate Fresque because that was sort of the first workshop that we took on board, but we have very similar tools for biodiversity because, of course, climate is only one side of the coin of the crisis that we're facing. And so we have a workshop on biodiversity and we have a workshop on circular economy as well. And, as we grow, we will add more planetary boundaries, but we thought, these are the three sort of good starting points, if you like, to actually understand.
Wow. I think I like that what you were saying about the caring point of people. I guess it sometimes could potentially feel quite overwhelming. And it's good that these workshops, I'm assuming, break it down into smaller pieces, which is good to make it more digestible. I guess what are some of the ways as a result of that people, the small things that people can do to sort of start the journey as a result of doing those workshops and things to sort of break down that overwhelm a little bit?
Yes, taking action is the best way to tackle eco distress. And we know that sharing your emotions with others is really important, but taking action is how you tackle it if you are feeling like, helpless. The model that we have developed at People for Nature is a train the trainer model, meaning that if you want to take action, I have a way as a facilitator to actually train you to take action, to facilitate those conversations in your community. That means we're building a community of people that are engaged, that are taking action. But also, as you continue to facilitate those workshops, I have facilitated quite a few myself. So I know they are all different. They're all different because they tap into collective intelligence. So it's not me giving you a lecture on climate science. I'm not interested in that. What I want is I want to hear what you think, what you know. And then we kind of create a little bit of a puzzle together, a puzzle of knowledge. I think that's really powerful. And it means also that whoever's facilitating is still learning, even though they're facilitating. So it's kind of a way to encourage people to take action, but also to continue to deepen their own understanding of the crisis. Now, interestingly, because I did some math recently with my community, we kind of thought, okay, so if I facilitate a workshop on, say, climate science, let's imagine we do the Climate Fresque one, to 14 people every couple of months, workshop every 2 months. So that's easy. That's something I can sustain as a volunteer. And only one person out of those 14 decides to take action and become a facilitator. Do you know how long it would take?
God, a long time?
Less than 4 years. Less than 4 years. So it is incredible what people can achieve when they come together.
Oh, that's very interesting. And do you think, I know my daughter, she's in grade 9, came home the other day and they were doing something, one of their assignments on, related to climate, etc. Do you think we're doing enough at the youth level to start talking about the problem?
No, we're not, Michelle. I wish I have two children. I have an 8-year-old and a 14-year-old. I mean, in school, I think a little bit of awareness on simple things like I teach my children how to treat and sort out waste. I think that's really important. I definitely focus at that age about their connection to nature. So take off your shoes, go in the grass, reconnect. We talked about insect, and this is probably going to freak you out. My daughter is fascinated with worms. She thinks worms are like the best pet in history. And I think this is it. This is because I have given her the opportunity to put her hands in the soil and kind of reconnect with the beauty of the soil, the beauty of earth, the beauty of the living systems that actually sustain us as a species. So there's nothing bad about worms. They're incredible, they're incredible little animals. It's just most people think of worms as, oh my goodness. But if they weren't there, and they're not going very well as a species, we would not have any food. We would not have any forest. So we need the worms, right? So I think at that age, you kind of go, we need to reconnect our children with nature and make sure that they're not freaked out or completely disconnected, but they fall in love with, the web of life. I think later on in high school, what I am observing is our teenagers certain incredible things like the water cycle and then the carbon cycle, but we don't explain to them the system. All of these things matter because they are part of a system called planet Earth. That system has its limits. It's in perfect balance before we actually started to play around with it. And it only it's important if you can actually elevate yourself and go, this is the importance of the water cycle. This is important of the climate cycle and the connection of all of that. Once you understand the system, you also understand that when you destroy the system, the water gets disrupted. The weather patterns get disrupted. Biodiversity gets affected. And that has consequences on human life, our health, the way we live, our economy. I think that's missing in our curriculum. And I'm fighting really hard to make sure that. I think there's also something really important to talk about when it comes to youth is we've got to make sure what the crisis that's happening, the climate crisis, the biodiversity is very overwhelming. It's very scary. And if we are teaching our young people, we have to place emotions back into the conversations. They're absolutely critical. They can't just be ignored. We need to explain the crisis and the systems to our young people, and we need to make sure we support them in the intellectual shift, in the intellectual understanding, because this is going to cause anger, frustrations, despair, and all of those other emotions. And our young people need support. Now, what I observe in young people when I come and facilitate workshop, have a yes, we can do it attitude. Adults don't have that. A lot of adults go, oh, it's too hard. It's too complex what you're telling me. We're never going to be able to solve the crisis. But young people don't have that. Young people, they look at it, they understand the entire system.
You're right. Yeah. Very good. Very good. And when you were doing all your travels across all the different countries, did you find that there are countries doing it better that we can sort of learn from? Or what did you take away from that?
Yeah, I think, we have, and we're very lucky in Australia, Indigenous cultures have and continue to have a very strong and deep connection. They do not separate society and nature. That's a very modern thing in human history. And that's something that has been driven and started by colonialism and capitalism. We have to reconnect with the idea that there is no separation between society and nature. It's one thing. So I think, you live in Australia. I feel extremely grateful to be on this land. And I feel extremely grateful to be able to go and connect with Aboriginal communities and First Nations knowledge and wisdom, because they, I think, hold a lot of the answers that we have questions for. So we just have to try to delve some understanding from them. And that's going to take some time. Around the world, I find the same thing. I think, my granddad grew up in the mountains in the southeast of France. He was indigenous to the area. He knew so many stories about the land. He tell me about each bird, each mushroom, each plant, climate and weather patterns. And he didn't have any education per se or per modern terms. So I wish I wish he was still there, and I wish, I could spend more time with him. And I think we have to very, very quickly reconnect with our elders, our First Nation knowledge to actually, allow them to pass on that knowledge, because otherwise it will be lost.
Completely agree with that. So if we do leave, I love your whole point of citizen-powered revolution. So obviously, people getting involved and collectively doing it together as a community. So if we leave it business as usual, it's a bit doom and gloom, but where will we end up?
I'm not even going to say, what I think, because I always say to people, no one cares about what I think, really. I listen to the scientists. And the scientists, when it comes to climate, the scientists we have is the IPCC group. The first working group, they're just climate scientists. They look at the data and they create scenarios of what will happen if we drastically reduce our carbon footprint, if we don't do anything, or if we continue to ramp up, to grow the CO2 footprint that we have. Yeah, it's looking very scary, Michelle. If we do not change the status quo, my children will know a world that is not livable for any species, including ours. And this is not in many generations. So we have to do something about it. We can't, the status quo is just not even an option to me. It's a scenario that the scientists are putting on a graph, but for me, it's not an option. And I will continue until I have my last breath on this planet to advocate for change, for a shift, an intellectual shift, a shift where we go, all right, we reconnect with the idea that there is no separation between human civilization, human society, and nature. It's one thing. And once we reconnect with that truth, with that understanding, then we can't be treating our climate and our biodiversity the way that.
That's a bit scary.
You talked about citizen-powered change, right? I explained earlier, I spent 10 years of my life in sort of decarbonization technologies. I was I don't know, I had so much hope in engineering, in solutions, in technologies. I thought, surely they're smart enough. They're going to work it out. I was worried about insects because my heart was talking to me. But on the other side, I had my very pragmatic kind of head that was like, that's all right. There's smart people out there that are sorting it out. Then later in life, I realized, no, this is actually probably one of the greatest threats to our planet and to humanity as a whole, is to believe that someone else or something else out there is going to solve it, is going to do it. No, you are the change. We are the change. If you, I, and everyone else listening to this is not waking up to the call, it's not going to happen because everyone else is going to think that we're doing it. And so for me, that understanding was like, okay, we need a real intellectual shift. We need people to wake up to the understanding of what's happening, and no one needs to solve the world's biggest challenge. No one can actually do that. Everyone can do their part and can kind of walk onto the journey of understanding where we're at, where we're heading, and kind of okay, I need to start taking action. I need to start doing my part. And that's a journey, because you can't completely change your lifestyle. You can't completely change everything that you are and everything that you always have been overnight. But just people, starting to be on that journey, for me, that's the most important. And so I think the trainer model that we have, People for Nature, is allowing exactly that. It's kind of, technologies are not going to solve the crisis. If our politicians, we're all frustrated about what's happening or what's not happening at the political level. So if those two big mechanisms, technologies, technique, and the political systems not solving the crisis, then what else do we have? Just us, right? I think it was last year, I was at a workshop and there was a beautiful Australian lady there. And she said to me something really interesting. She said, Audrey, do you think that it's because you were born in France, and so if you got, carry all this French DNA, that you think that committed citizens can actually start a revolution and change the system? I said, yeah, probably, but that's okay. If I can be that voice, I'll be happy.
No, and that's the thing, right? I'm sitting here myself and I'm sort of thinking in Australia, we're very laid back and relaxed, right? And that was probably what you felt when you first came. And I mean, it's a beautiful place and I think, do probably take it for granted, very much so. So with your workshops and such, I guess what level, where are you starting with all of this? Is it in the bigger companies where they are able to do the decarbonization and all that sort of things? Is it in just talking in general to everyday businesses? Is it in schools, or is it all of the above? I guess you want to share your message all around, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We go everywhere, Michelle. So we don't want to, we don't want to lose our charitable purpose. So for me, the community, all It's all, some people say, oh, who is your audience? My audience is all Australians. I have a vision to reconnect nature and society. And, for that, I understand that every Australian needs to be, on the planetary boundaries. So we don't really, have one audience per se. We run public workshops out in the community, not only in all major cities of Australia, but also in rural communities across Australia. We also have corporate workshops. I just ran last week a corporate workshop in a very large international pharmaceutical company. We run them in all sorts of industry. We did one in a pipeline building company last week as well. Like, I think what's of interest to me is that we do not leave anyone behind. And I think I observe, and I have observed for the last 20 years, what's happening with regards to the climate dialogue. It's extremely polarized. It's like everyone's been put in a box and, they don't want to be, labeled a certain way. And I think, no, this is a conversation for all citizens, no matter what you believe, what you don't like. For me, this is where the conversation, I think it's important that everyone understands what the scientists are telling us. But once you understand that, then it becomes a democratic dialogue, a democratic discussion. A few years ago, I don't know if your listeners will be familiar with this, but in France, the president decided to create a citizen convention on climate. So he picked 150 citizens out of the French population completely randomly. Ended up, of course, having some people who did not believe in climate change, thought it was a hoax, people that really believed in it, people that didn't care. It was a real big, diverse group. Now, they gave them the task of creating a series of recommendations to government. Okay, so real citizen voices for climate action. 18 months it took them. 18 months it took them to come up with 150 recommendations for the French government to act on. At the end of the 18 months, there was no more on the fact that climate change is real, the fact that is anthropogenic, so it is caused by humans and humans only. And we understand and we know the solutions and we just need to act. I think this is a very powerful story of democracy. And in Australia, we have democracy. So we have the power and we have the tools to actually do things like that. And I can see, there's a part of me sometimes I get a little bit depressed about the lack, like said, oh, we're quite laid back, etc. Yes, but Australians love nature. Australians are very close to the ocean, very close to the bush, very close to their birds, etc. And we have an amazing amount of natural resources. So we have absolutely everything it takes.
Do you find though that the level of conversation or the knowledge is different at the different levels? So you're speaking the talk to differently for each level so that people understand?
I don't change the narrative for each level. As a matter of fact, even with teenagers, I run workshops for year 10, year 11. They're no different to the narrative that I have with an adult or a scientist, which I think is the power of the tool that we use. Is there is no jargon, there is no kind of understanding. I usually start with, showing the cover page of the IPCC report. And I can tell you, I've been running this for years. I haven't found a single person that recognizes the cover page, which means no one's read the IPCC report, which is a good starting point because whether I have scientists in the room or year 11, then it puts everyone back on the same level. It's like, all right, let's now get started with the understanding that we all know a little bit, but we don't know much. I do see a difference in between sort of corporate workshops, government workshops, and public workshops. When we go and walk into government agencies or councils and corporates, we're usually, engaged by the sustainability officer, or sometimes it's the HR training and development officer. So we have a lot of our tables that do not want to be there. They've been asked to be there.
Interesting.
And while, in public workshops, to come and spend 3 hours with me and talk about climate change, you must be keen. And it doesn't mean like last week I had a few people that had no clue about what climate change actually even meant, but they were still there. They were interested. They were curious. In the corporate shops, we don't always have that. We have people that start with crossed arms and very, cynical and skeptical. And I'm yet to see one person that leaves the room that way. They usually leave the room with a big thank you, a smile on their face, and go, you know what? I have actually spent 3 meaningful hours. It was apolitical. It was very scientific. And it was quite a nice way to, because I say everyone is welcome around my table. It doesn't really matter what you think about climate change. As a matter of fact, it doesn't really matter what I think. We're here to learn, we're here to share, we're here to brainstorm as, as a group of citizens, as a group of people that form society.
I think, yes, I would imagine that you would describe it all and really engage them in such a way that they'd want to do something. I think you would have that effect on people, which is wonderful. So I guess, look, we're almost at the end. What would you say, what would you leave with people? What is that final message you want to say to people to really sort of multiply this and get this out to the market?
Well, I would say if you've been listening to this and some of it has resonated and you think, oh, yes, I've been thinking about all these things, and come and help us. There are many ways that people can support us. Of course, come and join a workshop to really have a look at what we're doing. If you want to become a facilitator and an ambassador of our charity, even better. The more people we have, the more power we have and the more influence we have. But you can also share our events. You can make donations to our charity. There's so many different ways that people can actually support charities in Australia. Charities like ours, although we are a social enterprise, so we do employ people, we do have remuneration, schemes, etc., to support the people that are, doing the work. It's a really difficult business model. And I think we really need the support of not just the people that believe in our vision, but also the businesses that believe in our vision. And you have no idea, now that I run a charity, you have no idea how much a small donation how much difference it can make to charities. We run very lean. We do the work that we do because we believe in it, not to make profits, not to make revenue. And so every little donation, every little bit of support, sometimes it's just someone, walking to me and say, hey, this is amazing work. Like, thank you for the things you do. For me, that's a sort of revenue. That's the sort of support that keeps us going every day. So that's what I would say to your followers and listeners. Do not underestimate the power that you have in giving a smile.
Gold. Absolutely wonderful. Audrey, I love your passion, and I can absolutely understand why people will come on board and want to help and want to get involved. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom today. And your passion, my goodness, it's been absolutely divine. So thank you.